You know, back in my day, there were only 151 Pokemon. None of them sucked. All of the designs were amazing, and the game wasn't a buggy mess. Well, at least it wasn't a catch grab. Oh dear.
I think just about everyone that knows about Pokemon can evade the fact that people look very fondly on the previous games. The first generation has certainly sold the most out of any other game, leading the pack with a whopping 31 million copies. Not to mention, Pokemon Fever was so mainstream that everyone was talking about it. And when I say everyone,
this is Pikachu. One thing I noticed about him right off was his tail. It's a lightning bolt, and it's a satanic Z.
There's no more of a clear sign than this if you can't even escape at a church of all places. But it wasn't just the social aspect that people look fondly of. The aspects of the game tended to have a pretty memorable impact as well. That iconic music from Pallet Town to the champion theme. The insane glitches that could be pulled off relatively easily for the impact that they have in the game. All the way down to the unforgettable dialogue that still has cultural relevance to this day. And with these games being as popular as they are, it's no wonder that Pokemon tends to reference this era way more than they should. You'd be hard-pressed to find a generation that doesn't at least mention or heavily cater to the yesteryear. Gen 2 includes Kanto, Gen 3 has a remake to the first games, Gen 6 has the majority of its newest ability, the Mega Evolution, feature mostly Gen 1 Pokemon, and Gen 7 nostalgia baits the hell out of its players with altered forms of Kantonian Pokemon, along with an adult form of Red and Blue appearing in the game itself. That's not to mention the third remake of the game, the card game having a special set centered on the original 151 in recent years. Twice, kinda. And the infamous Pokemon mobile games that heavily skew towards them. It's pretty clear that, for the Pokemon Company at least, the original 151 are mascots of sorts for the franchise. However, on the 2020 poll conducted with at least a few million participants, out of the top 30 Pokemon, only 5 were actually Kanto Pokemon, with number 1 being Greninja, a Gen 6 Pokemon, having over 140,000 votes, and number 2 being Lucario, a Gen 4 Pokemon with 100,000 votes. In fact, Charizard is ranked all the way down at number 4 with 94,000 votes. Well, that's still a lot of votes. That means Greninja beat it by over 1.5 times the amount of votes, on top of every other vote that people could make. Going further down the list, the next Kanto Pokemon drops even further down at number 10, being Gengar with 60,000 votes. Which is amusing to me, considering how much I hear people love Gen 1 and why they hate the newer games. Hell, even the company's own mascot is all the way down at number 19. But usually things tend to speak differently in terms of sales of the games. Money talks and all that jazz, at least. Looking into those remakes, both Gen 3 and 7.5, the sales numbers are 12 million for FireRed and Leaf Green, and 15 million for Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee, which are numbers that any developer would love, especially for a genre of a game that's been a remake. One that already has its core story, plot, and mechanics all fleshed out. But in comparison to the others, these numbers are just below the mainline games. Which is understandable, these are remakes after all, and are not new experiences. The meme that Pokemon will sell no matter what state it's in is true, I guess, even if it's not even Pokemon. So I'd say despite what the individual feels about their own love for a specific Pokemon, to some level it's kinda true that Gen 1 sells, even if it's just the same game with a different coat of paint. And I'd actually agree that Gen 1 games are pretty fun. I played through FireRed and Leaf Green a total of 10 plus times at this point, and I have over 150 hours in Let's Go. Don't know how the hell that happened. An embarrassingly high amount for a game that is as basic as it is. Though it did come out at a time where Switch was desperately lacking a Pokemon title, and, well, it is the most solid Switch Pokemon game, considering it's missing a lack of glitches that every other game just seems to love to harbor. That includes Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl. But I kinda think that the series should just let go and stop chasing the past, considering how much damage this limitation causes. Because the older games were seriously another beast compared to how they are today. I've recently played through Gen 1, and while there's a handful of things that stood out as unique to me and that were pretty interesting to relive, older games have a good amount of variety to them in simply catching and raising Pokemon. Unlike today, where the movesets, abilities, and evolution levels are readily available to look at, back then, you could catch a Pokemon and have no idea what journey you're going to be getting into. In fact, especially in the early game, you're limited to being able to just attack with normal moves and wail on your opponent until they go down. Special moves are reserved for Pokemon, not just a way to break through type effectiveness, but as signature moves. And some won't even get that until much later, like level 30 if you're lucky. Some Pokemon could evolve, but back then you have no idea how to do so, or even if they could. Sticking around with Magikarp was mostly a bad idea, especially considering that they had a move that couldn't even damage. And when it could, it does very little compared to your others. But if you actually took a chance and tried to level it up to level 20, it becomes one of the strongest powerhouses in the game, which made it the type of game that thrived on playground information gathering. Something that you've done in your game could be totally foreign to another person that you've met. Your entire team could be completely different and could amaze others that had no idea that weak Pokemon could evolve much later at that level. It was genuinely pretty amazing on how much things would vary from player to player, making word-of-mouth conversations about the games a higher point of intrigue. I actually remember one time in middle school that I shocked some friends by performing a glitch on Pokemon Yellow that wasn't well documented online. And by shocked, I mean I just proved them wrong by being able to get Mew. Not that it could have been traded to a DS in those days anyway, so it was kind of pointless getting one on an older console. But the point still stands that intrigue through information and the lack of the game being fully mapped out like it is today makes it a golden conversation piece. And collecting these creatures, not only just in the game to trade around, but also in real life was a peak of fun. I still never forgave my brother for burning his collection because he thought they were demonic. But even in the game, you weren't the all-knowing, all-powerful protagonist that you are in later versions. Sure, you're still beating everyone you come across, but you're not some 10-year-old kid going on a journey to save the world. You're just one person in it. Most of the trainers in the game treat you like you're just some brat, or completely are indifferent towards you. One person even makes false accusations about you just to be a jerk to you. The world just seems to be a bit more lived in when the NPCs are discussing things about themselves and the environment around them instead of just talking about game facts. That making it less about the player and more about, well, the world that you're occupying. This has been something that's been sorely missing in the newer games, as you're the prodigy that's supposed to be praised in every iteration that comes out. You feel not like the protagonist of the story, but a person going on a journey, facing adversity after adversity, making your own stories to be told. Which makes sense about these games. They feel far more personalized than many of the others, even in RPGs of other genres. Most of them have you going through a set path to prevent a threat that has been going on in the background, but in Pokemon, Team Rocket just happens to be in your way of becoming a Pokemon Master. I mean, circling back to those signature moves that you have on your Pokemon, the teams feel less like something that are used to enhance your Pokemon, and more of something that's used to make them feel more unique. After all, powerful moves are very rare, so topping that with the ones that are elemental and have special effects, plus having a Pokemon that can access those moves, makes the unique Pokemon that you've been given much more special in comparison to Jerry's Blastoise that doesn't even know Ice Beam. It's these little things that can't be replicated that turns a game that's noticeably buggy with repetitive mechanics into a tailored experience that feels much more unique to you. Then you have the anime that everyone's watching, the card game, the media. Well, it's pretty close to how things are today with the amount of saturation, but far outweighed with the amount of intrigue being presented to you and where you can go for that. Without the internet being as prevalent as it is, when something was big back then, it was big. Comparing that to newer games, it feels like there seems to be a lot going against it in terms of being able to capture the same appeal. Sure, it's got a plethora of mediums giving it coverage, but it's got an even higher barrier of entry to witness them. The card game is around and kicking, but with the saturation of other, better card games with much more fulfilling mechanics, the only people you hear talking about them is either kids with parents or siblings that enjoy it, or a select few adults that still collect and play it. The anime... Okay, yeah, what's happening with that, Netflix? The other mobile game has their fans, don't get me wrong, but they tend to have more flaws than the mainline series themselves. And don't get me started on Unite. Scarlet and Violet aren't nearly as charming with its flaws when you have literally hundreds of other games that came out that year that are on par or better in terms of entertainment. And I fear, because of, not despite, how well Gen 9 ended up selling, that the next game probably won't have all of its flaws fleshed out either, especially the slow gameplay loops and the lackluster story. But it does have one appeal going for it that I don't think other franchises have as strongly. Well, except for Sanrio. And that would be the proliferation of the designs and characteristics of Well, the Pokémon. I had mentioned before that Gen 1 isn't the strongest in favorites for many, at least according to that poll. And there happens to be a good amount of representation between all 7 generations for the series at that point. Each new release brings a ton of fresh and adorable creatures to latch onto. And the Pokemon Center website is certainly paying attention to that attention and love that we give it. His name is Sweetie, and today's his birthday. I think it's why the Pokemon Company does as well as it does with each release. These critters have relevance because they're constantly being pumped out, processed, and thrown to new faces that love a good design. You don't become a media franchise dominator for years by making mediocre games after all. Which is why the series and the games feel a lot more lifeless as things go on. Why they seem to be the side projects rather than the main focus of the series. They're more of an advertisement if anything. Generation 1 and some of the subsequent games are more or less establishing itself by making a unique take on the RPG genre and its customizable experiences. But as time goes on, there's really only a few ways that you can have a different playthrough. And that's by finding a creature to attach yourself to and raising it as your baby. Then buying all the plushies and love them equally. And if you're lucky, maybe, just maybe, you'll also pull your favorite card from a booster pack that you got at Walmart. I mean, your local gaming store. So, what do you think? Should Pokemon focus on newer Mons and feature them more prominently? Well, the anime hasn't been as prominent in some years. The media that's being saturated everywhere is sure to catch attention of fans that are looking for that type of content. I've loved Pokemon all my life, but it seems as though when it comes to the newer core games, I just can't find the same appeal that it once had. The thing that it tried to capture in the first place. Either way, I'm Blinky, and thanks for watching. Would you mind doing me a favor and leaving a like if you've made it this far into the video? I'd really appreciate it, if you did like it at least. And even if you didn't, making it this far is kind enough and I highly appreciate it. Take care of yourself. And I'll see you tomorrow. Spreaky, 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 Tito. Spreaky, 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 Tito. Spreaky, spreaky.